Welcome. This is the Senior Life Academy, located on the campus of the University Park United Methodist Church here in Dallas, Texas. I am Dee Dee Cassad, and I have with me on our panel today Miriam Mathis, Stephen Fleming, Bill Matthews, and Diana Wilson. Today we're going to talk about social connections. Who do we know, who do we not know that's beyond our church surroundings? Not only immediately, but maybe at a distance. Who are the isolated people that we need to minister to? And this could go in many directions. We've already thought about several. Diane, where do you see us going?
Well, when we were having the discussion earlier, I was talking about my neighborhood and how important it is to be connected to my community there. I live in East Dallas, and I work in Volunteers and Patrol with the Dallas Police Department and other people in my community, and we get trained to be on patrol. I also make a point of knowing my neighbors.
And that is important.
Knowing who they are and what they need. If someone's sick, if you take food, or I've actually got somebody new moving in across the street from me. I already tried to figure out what it is I'm going to take over there, just to say hi and welcome. A neighbor of mine who lives over on another street has an annual July party where he invites, and we have, technology is wonderful because we have a group called Next Door.
Yes.
Oh,
that is our community, and I live in Casa View Haven, and so he invited everybody in Casa View Haven to come over to his house and see his chickens and swim in his pool, and bring something.
Did you find that there were some that did not come?
Oh, sure.
And then what do you do about those that did not come?
Well, you deal with the ones who come first.
Yes, for sure.
Well, that's true, but talk about the isolated person, the one that maybe too timid, doesn't feel like they belong. How do we search those out?
But if you do well, I think, for instance, like the people who are moving in across the street, I'm going to go over there and meet them and say hi and take something and
take a plate of cookies.
Well, it won't be cookies because you know me, but
vegetables.
Yes. Thank you. Something in hummus. Anyhow, it's
dangerous with you, I tell you.
But I feel like that even if I'm shopping at Albertsons and I'm in line and I'm checking out, I like to look the cashier in the eye and say, hi, how are you? Or if they ask you, did you find everything? Look at them and say, I did, thank you. And so that there's constantly, I just think God's love is with us always. We are so blessed, and that we can share it by being God's hands and feet in the world in a multitude of ways. It doesn't have to be just churchy stuff.
Well, you live in a retirement center, Bill. Tell me, how do you know everybody that's in your retirement center?
Well, I know them, but not well. It's very interesting. We just had a conversation yesterday with a woman with whom we've been almost 2 years now. She just happened to sit at the dining room table with us, the three of us, my wife and I, and she sat down. May I sit with you? Well, she sat with us, and we started talking, and she has a fascinating story, that we had not a clue about. We didn't know her background at all. We see her, we greet her, in a friendly manner, and we see her at meals and then at the residence council meetings. But until we sat down yesterday and talked one-on-one,
and broke bread together.
Two-on-one, and we made our various orders, and we have that privilege to do that. Then we have the privilege to wait for a while it comes from the kitchen, and that filling that time in by conversing,
a total stranger.
Do you have family? And we started with that, and she has 3 daughters, and then one was going to visit this next week, and we said, we look forward to meeting her, and And she had met one of our daughters who had visited us several times. And so, it was that interplay, the interaction. It was just at a very personal
Well,
connection.
if you believe what we've been told about this church, that 60%, Stephen, of our neighborhood, I don't know how far that extends, say circumference around a mile, say, does not go to church. What do we do? See, how do we find out these people and find out why they don't go to church, or did they ever go to church, or are they never going to even consider church? But here we are on the corner of a very busy street, and yet there are people close to us that we do not know.
Well, I think we have to, first of all, be real clear about our motives. I mean, are we trying to build our church up? Because if if that's your motive, people can smell that coming.
Well, that's phony.
Yeah,
That's phony. It's phony. That's
and
right.
it's agenda.
And I didn't mean
it's
that, of
agenda
course.
oriented. No, but I want to get our cards on the table.
Right.
I think you yourself may not be able to solve the problem of doing that for everybody around us or myself, but it needs to be something that is cultivated in the sense of a church and what a church is. And certainly as Methodists, with our open communion table, we ought to have an ingrained sense of inclusivity just with people. I may not be able to reach further than my next door neighbor, or two or three further down than that on either side. But to model that and to affirm that and to applaud that and encourage it among all of our members, I think is an important thing to do.
But your word isolation says a lot to me, because I remember, and I may have told you all this years ago when we set up some senior citizens in Dallas under the Title VII program. I walked into one. It was in East Dallas, and a little lady was sitting over there, and tears were just coming down her cheeks. And I went over and I asked her if she was all right. And do you know what she said to me? She said, "This is the first time in 7 years anybody has touched me."
Yeah.
So they're
That's going on out
They're
there.
isolated people out there, and days go by that we're aware of, but we do nothing about. Is it the church's responsibility, or is it our responsibility as a disciple of Christ to seek those people out? Or that kind of haunts me. It really does.
Well, I feel like when I was telling the story about my neighborhood, if we all did that,
Yeah, exactly.
clearly this lady had neighbors. So if someone
All she had seen
knocked on
even
her door.
was the postman that came by to bring bills. You know,
Yes,
and think of that. That's
well, and you wonder about where their families are too. It's
I think that, and the truth is, you're not going to mesh with everybody.
Of course not.
And there'll be some people that prefer to stay isolated as far as you're concerned. But you don't know when you may be the person who's knocking on the door that unlocks a door that establishes a relationship that could just be real important to someone. And again, I applaud it when it's a church program, but it really doesn't need to be a program. It ought to be inherent in our identity as Christian disciples.
absolutely. That's a good point. Absolutely.
To loan a tool to someone,
In other words, it should not be a cause. It should be a mission.
to trust someone before you assume that it's not safe to trust someone. I've really noticed, I've just retired from the active ministry, and I have to say over the last 41 years, people have become more and more afraid or reluctant to just make an initial contact.
Yes.
And I really think it's just become a part of our culture. Maybe 9/11 had something to do with it. Maybe who knows what. But
Well, that is a factor.
I
There's
think
no
we
question
need
about it.
we need to show that we're people who are open to others and trusting.
Well, I keep thinking of some way that's a door opener. What's a good way to open a door? And we've had people come to call on us and bring us something, a little something, and usually it's food or a flower, a potted plant or something. And
It usually takes a disaster, though, for that to happen. When you were talking
well,
about,
I'm saying let's do it when it's not a disaster.
Right.
Just be a thoughtful
Absolutely.
neighbor.
but when 9/11 happened, we had people from the neighborhood come to church because
Oh.
people didn't know what to do.
But it had
with that
something to
disaster.
do with the fear factor too. All of a sudden, when something happens, they realize this could happen to us.
Right.
See, so
Well-
so fear brings people to church.
It also brought them to school. I was teaching school the day that happened, and we had parents come to this. I'm sure that happened to you as well. We had parents who came to school because they couldn't stand
Let
being
their
home
child.
alone.
Oh,
Being home alone with the immensity of the disaster in front of them. So you come to school and things are
Sort of
Normal,
sort
sort
of
of.
stable.
sort of stable
Normal.
anyhow. I don't know about
True
normal,
enough.
but stable.
But it all brings us back to what you were talking about. And in every kind of situation where you find yourself, you look at someone in the eyes and you connect with them in some kind of way. And how many times during a day do we have an interaction with a person who never looks at you, or you don't think to look at them? I mean, just the eye to eye is the first step anyway. And I think it's so important because people are not used to having other folks look in their eyes and say, "How are you doing?"
yeah.
They just aren't. And so it's, I don't always do it, but I try to make myself aware no matter where I am. And especially when I'm irritated with somebody because they're not acting right. And I say, that is somebody's baby boy, or that is somebody's
Yeah.
mama. I just
And
need
Jesus
to,
loves them.
and I just need to bite my tongue and say, "God bless you."
Well, there are some people who never meet a stranger.
That's true.
They're kind and they just, everybody is their friend from the get go, and yet there are a lot of people who are just the opposite. They do not look people in the eye, and they do not ask how they're doing. But let's shift.
But
Go.
maybe they have other ways that they, when we did that capital campaign, we had that phrase, "Lord, what do you want to do through me?" And I'm not sure that we all need to operate the same way. That that there are people who are better off in structured situations, and so they go down and they work with the Presbyterians at that food pantry downtown Dallas.
And look at Saturday. How many people did you have helping you get the breakfast ready? There are people who
Yes.
who work here all the time that you never really unless you come, you do not know that they do that. And
I did not know until our last Mission Action Committee meeting that there are 7 or 8 people at our church who 365 days a year go and deliver bread
Yeah.
to the homeless shelters.
there's also a person in this church that takes the church membership and prays for a person a day, where they know that person or not. What a beautiful thing that is. In other words, you don't know what day you're going to show up with that person, but just the thought of it, that they take the time to take the membership of this church and pray for that individual. I think that is it's something that doesn't cost much. It's easy to do, but it's highly.
It would be really neat to take that to the next step and meet some of those people you're praying for, and
Good
seek
point.
them out, and then I'm thinking of another angle of the idea of taking the pot plant somewhere. Invite them to your house and invite them for a cup of coffee or tea or just a visit, just a friendly visit. I'm going to be home at 10:30 tomorrow morning. Would you be able to come over and have a little talk?
Well,
Let's get acquainted.
Well, see, it goes
Just open
back
the
to who is your neighbor?
There you go.
And when
Well, if you haven't a clue, then maybe that's the mandate to go ahead and get a clue.
So
and see
maybe
if
the
you can
question
find
is, who's not your neighbor?
and who's not your neighbor? That's right.
Because I can't think of anybody who's not my neighbor.
Yeah.
It's because it doesn't have to be geographically.
That's right. It doesn't have to
contiguous.
be in the house next door.
Right.
That's true. That's true.
And to go back up just a little bit about the praying for people,
Mm-hmm.
in this church, we used to have a group of women and it was women, on Monday morning. It's like a prayer coven, and we had a prayer box out in the information center, and people could write their prayer requests on there, and they would pray for.
Well, and we have that list every Sunday too, for
Right,
people to pick
right.
up and pray for those who need the prayer. This is well received, I'm sure. I think people do pick those up and then do pray for them. But I just added that because I did happen to know the person who does that, and I think it was extremely important. Well, we need to wrap this up if that's all right with everybody. Thank you all for watching us today. We'd like to hear your comments. Our email's on the bottom of the screen. Please email us, tell us what you would like to hear. We would entertain any subject matter or issue you would like for us to discuss in the future. And in the meanwhile, may God surround you with His grace.